Hi everyone, good to see you all here. Some new members also. Nice to see you. So these are the dates for the upcoming FOF events. Please note them down so you can plan your calendars accordingly. So today's topic is something I find infinitely interesting. And since Rajiv has given a primer on what AI is and what's happening in developments in I thought we will discuss some applications one by one. I don't know the schedule of how I'll discuss these things, but we'll plan them accordingly. This is something I found truly interesting when I was studying for the course that we gave in Flame. Uh, my aim today is to basically go very slow, try and help you understand conceptually what's going on, because I'm not a doctor or a medical practitioner. So all my understanding is what I have understood, and I'm trying to impart that. I may explain some things, and people in the audience who have medical background or understand medicine, or people in the online audience also, if they understand better than me, please correct me in the comments. So the problem with this presentation is I had to actually shut my laptop yesterday night because I was continuously adding more slides. The medicine is such a field which has been using AI for the longest time. Just like financial services has been using AI in the form of machine learning for the longest time for automating processes, for trying to improve the productivity of the administrative staff, or trying to improve diagnostics. A lot of things have been in the works, and we'll discuss some of them right now. But the more you read about this field, the more you feel like you can add and give a context of what's going on. So finally, yesterday night, I just shut my laptop. I never shut my laptop. I just close the lid of my laptop every time. But yesterday, I shut it down because I didn't want to add a single new slide to the presentation. So let's first decide what the goals of AI in medicine are. Some of these are very, very simple goals, which are very, very obvious, but just have to recap once. Detect any diseases or illnesses very early. If you can have diagnostic tools available which can identify if the disease is onset or it's going to happen, it's beneficial for the doctor to speed up the diagnosis for that particular patient. Also, admin work that is there. In India, we may not see this very easily because the front end of the medical establishment is visible to us, but the back end is not. So whenever you go to a hospital for claiming an insurance on your medical treatment, you have to go through all these hoops of administrative filings. There are proper documentation. Everything has to be proper. And that administrative work is voluminous. And hence, there is a huge back-end staff in most hospitals. And for that, if you can improve the speed of this administrative process by using softwares which use machine learning or AI tools, that can speed up the process for most people. It won't be as manpower intensive as it is today. One of the most important criteria for using any technology in medical field is to reduce the cost overall for that treatment so that it is accessible to most people. Also, the geographies where these are not developed enough to have medical tools available to general population, if you have a cheaper tool available, if it can travel with you on, say, a laptop or on the mobile phone now, it becomes easier to access even remote parts of the world where medical tools are not easily available. And there are hundreds of examples of this also. Even without the use of machine learning, a lot of tools have been created to do spot blood testing or even measure some arrhythmia or heart or ECG or something like that on the field rather than having a proper setup that we see in the lab today. And most importantly, reducing time and turnaround time of the reports. So if you are going in a remote area, people will not wait for you to give the report to them. So you need to have machines or technology which will give the report instantaneously or give the resolution or diagnosis instantaneously. People will probably travel a long distance to meet the doctor or the medical professional, and this can actually save time for those people. Most interesting now is happening is people are becoming more and more aware of all these medical tools or sensors that we are putting on our body. So if you wear a fitness watch, if you wear a fitness ring, if you wear a continuous glucose monitor patch, you would have seen all these things in social media also. People are wearing them for enthusiasts as well as regular people who want to know what their body stats are. So the acceptance of having data about your own body is now mainstream. People are trying to collect more and more data about themselves and have a trend of how they have how their body is changing over a period of time. That actually helps the medical establishment also, where reports are available and people can have a baseline of your health every time. So with a lot of these consumer devices like Apple Watches, Fitbits, or Pixel Watches, or whichever tools are available, they are also now participating in these programs where you can do a cardio study, you can do a sleep study, and users can then volunteer and participate in these studies in order to create that baseline for themselves. And lastly, and most importantly, is patient monitoring, where you may have started treatment for a patient, but the patient's compliance of taking medicines, the patient's ability to understand when to take that medicine, you can actually program it in a software, and the software can provide notifications to you. Again, this cannot be automated. You don't need a human interface for that. Although it may not sound AI, it just seems like a software as a service, but that's what it is. Many times you just need a simple tool. You don't need to put the full force of AI or machine learning behind all these things. The goals of medical AI are quite interesting. I think one of the most important is the wider access of all these tools given to all the people in the world. So, while we talk about AI in medicine, these are the current live applications. And this is not something of a small list. It's actually a very, very specific list. And in each category, for example, if you start with radiology and screening, the category of oncology, ophthalmology, cardiology, each will have hundreds of models, which are machine learning models, which are being tested right now in the field and have been tested for the longest period of time. So all these university medical colleges will have their research programs going on for all these things, and they will have a very, very narrow, specific tool created for quickly diagnosing something in each of these categories of areas. Some of these are very, very well known. So cancer or eyes, related to eyes, related to heart, related to your brain, related to your lungs, related to your skin, or even your bones. Some of these things are just pattern matching, which can be given a fancy term of AI, but essentially it's machine learning. Patterns have been recognized, models have been created, and these models become better and better as you feed more and more data to it. And we'll talk about a very interesting change that has happened ever since transformers have come up on the scene, as to what has happened to all these models that are already out there. Another interesting application of AI which is happening as we speak is the admin part, which I mentioned, the back-end part of the medical establishment. So in our country, we may not find this as a very important thing to do, but in countries where the insurance industry is very well developed, the doctor's notes are very, very important for processing the insurance claim over a period of time. So transcription of the patient's interaction with doctor is very important. So doctors mostly spend time in the clinical meeting to listen to the patient, and in the back end, somebody takes notes and they will fill up the patient records. So if you can have this system naturally record the conversation and use natural language processing that is already available. So you can see YouTube subtitles, you can see your mobile phones automatically provide you captioned quotes when you are watching the video live. These things can be made available to the tools that doctors are using for transcribing. So no longer you need to write on a piece of paper, then somebody types it, and then it is available in the particular format. You can actually live on the fly record everything that you want. Another interesting thing is because you're now putting everything in digital format, the management of patient records becomes very, very easy. So you have all the database in digital format. You can easily access it anywhere you want. And in most countries, this is a de facto thing which is required. Every time you have a patient record created, it has to be online, it has to be digitized. In India, we are getting there. So most hospitals will have their own siloed databases. But in developed countries where insurance is a developed industry, they will have a centralized system as well. One of the interesting developments is in mental health area, where people use these apps. And these apps, essentially, if you are undergoing some mental health issue, or if you are diagnosed with some mental health issue, these apps can actually help gauge your mood at a particular time and try and deviate you from the pattern of behavior, which will be harmful for you. So some of these apps implement AI tools. They suddenly pop on your screen and check your mood. You have to press a button whether you are feeling good, or feeling sad, or feeling elated. They will have all the adjectives coming up in front of you. And again, these are adjectives created which are keywords which the user has to select. Based on that, they will determine the mood of the person. And if the person is anxiety prone, person is suicide prone, you can actually intervene much sooner, and there will be a alert at the back end, a flag at the back end, which will help the system detect that this is a mental health issue which is ongoing right now. Another thing where data is in abundance is your genetic data. So you would have heard that genome sequencing has happened already of the human DNA. So we know exactly what the genetic code of a human being is. But what if there are these errors in that genetic code which lead to diseases in the future? So there is a predictive aspect to it as to what can go wrong in your genetic profile if the mutation happens in those genes, and if those genes are active in your particular genetic code. All these things can be quickly determined now, which used to take probably months, 20 years back, now can happen in 5-10 minutes. And these studies have become more and more temporal. So for example, as newer and newer genes are now being discovered, and the mutations have been discovered, you can actually have a record of how your genetic study has evolved over a period of time. Again, these are voluntary things right now. Nothing is compulsory, but it is easy to understand now if some predictive counseling is required for a person to know that, okay, this person is prone to this particular illness. Can somebody intervene before the illness actually occurs? And this actually helps for illnesses where there's a genetic component to it, like heart disease or even some neurological diseases, where you can actually have a early warning indicator through the data that is already fed to the system. And I last year was most interested in drug development. It's very obvious right now, but you will be surprised as to how many drug development companies actually are using AI already over the past couple of decades. So they will not call it AI. It was to call something else. It was machine learning at that time. And AI is now the buzzword which everybody wants to use. And if you go through the conference calls of all these companies, you will see AI just littered around like sprinkles on top of some desert. So these are live applications. This is nothing new I'm talking about right now. Everybody would have probably read somewhere as to what applications people have already used. So one of the most important questions people ask, the key question, I think, if you read any literature, so this is in context of medicine, but if you read the literature of AI, the whole idea is, can AI replace a human doing that particular job? Now, the interesting part is, if you see any professional, I'm just focusing on the medical professional right now, they will be doing hundreds of tasks throughout the day in order to achieve their job that they're doing. Some tasks can definitely be automated, which can actually save time and actually help them perform better and actually give them more time to do other things which otherwise they were not able to do. So I think instead of thinking of it as replacing the medical professional completely, replacing some tasks will be a better way of looking at it. So it's not a employment replacement, it's essentially a task replacement. So people who are only narrowly focused on one task and doing their one task today, they may find a problem with employment, but can they be trained to do something else? That is a debatable question today. So this is the biggest challenge in most of the fields, and it's not just for the people in the admin staff. That is the easiest one we can think of. But people who are known as the godfather of AI, Jeffrey Hinton in 2015. It's 2015. This is even before we had ChatGPT or any other models. Right. So Jeffrey Hinton famously said, I don't know if he was joking, that's why the red asterisk over there, but he said that we should stop training radiologists, and he was not alone. So another person which people track in the AI field, Andrew Ng, this is 2017, he also mentioned that should they be worried because the models are actually becoming better at, say, in this example, detecting pneumonia through chest X-rays. Now, it's quite fascinating. This 2017, even before we had all these transformers and all these lingo littered in our conversation. And here we are in 2022. There's an article from ET, I think from March this year, or even 2022. This says that given that radiologists in India are in short supply with only 20,000 or so for a population of 1.4 billion, so 1 is to 100,000 kind of a ratio of radiologists. So we really need specialists, subspecialists, generalists in the field of radiology, despite the fact that 2023 is supposed to be the boom of AI, right? Everybody talks about AI today as if it's everywhere. So it's not really very, very obvious that people's jobs can be replaced so easily. I want to give you an idea of a workflow, and later on I also have a short video. It's a 12-minute long video which actually details the implementation of AI in India. So it gives a very near-term context to us as to what is happening in India, and you'll be surprised as to how advanced some of the projects in India also compared to what they're doing in the world. So again, this is a very simple flow from a research report from Bernstein. The idea is simple, right? You have a machine which does diagnostic imaging for you. You have the process of acquiring the image itself. It can be a chest X-ray, it can be a cardio, can be a sonography, whatever you want, or an MRI. Then you have a radiology workflow which is already present in the hospital setting, where you do a real-time analysis of the scan. You also, after the image is acquired, you do a post-processing, you scan it, and again the professional, the radiologist, will have his own comments on that. Then you have to manage the information and plan the treatment for that person if there is an issue. And also, you have various applications which are using these AI models, which can then compare your results with that model. And eventually what happens is, it goes to post-processing, goes to other diagnostic aids, and it goes to training newer radiologists on those tools which are perfected or working better in the current system. And if you see, interestingly, the companies at the bottom, most of these are companies who are already making medical equipment. So what we may think AI is something very new or something catching on today, it's actually being developed as part of the R&D projects of all the companies who are already selling medical equipment, imaging equipment in the industry. Let me give you a image context of what's going on. Some of the pioneers or leading OEMs who sell medical imaging equipment are very well-known players like Philips, Siemens, GE, and Canon, and they are basically looking the efficiency side of how to improve efficiency of the professional when they're using these machine learning or AI tools or algorithms directly into their software. Again, there is a very interesting context about data, who owns it, and how to manage it, and are they actually selling the machine or are they selling the model that they are using. And there are all these other upstarts, including Google and other guys, who are providing all these models and support to the existing machine and ecosystem. So they today are not competitors. Today they don't have data. Today they don't have the access to all the patient access that is there for doctors who are already using these machines. But interestingly, when users are also becoming more democratic in giving data, it might be interesting as to what data these companies also collect in the future. So there are upstarts over here who are working with the OEMs, and the OEM themselves have their own research programs which are creating better models for their machines. I just want to highlight this one slide from, again, if you just go through some of the medical papers, I don't recommend doing that. They're really boring. Yeah, I don't enjoy reading them. But what I find interesting is every year there are these teams competing across different categories of imaging. So this is an example of teams competing on just X-ray pathology detection. So based on what conditions you're detecting, there is a human doctor, then there is a team of medical researchers from some medical university somewhere. Then there are some other people who are using modern AI tools. And there are other people who, this is the comparison from Yale's medical college. So they were comparing their method of manual detection versus the model they were using versus somebody else's model, and the error rates of what is happening in other models. So it's quite interesting that in many cases where they're highlighting yellow, the models are surpassing the human accuracy in detecting this. And the year is 2017. So I'm not saying this is something which is happening today. It has already happened and it continues to happen. The iterations are already happening. And with newer and newer AI tools and models available, people are actually surpassing human accuracy also. So it's, again, difficult to answer that question whether we require radiologists or medical professionals if AI tools are available. So where does the human aspect come in is a question everybody should ask. This is again an example from this guy, Pranav Rajpurkar from Harvard and Andrew Ang. They partnered with this team in 2022. So the interesting part is at this time, the models that they were using, the input was labeled chest X-rays. So basically every chest X-ray will have a label of what is wrong with that X-ray and the doctor's note along with it. That data was fed into the models, and that's why the accuracy of models was better in many cases. Fast forward to last year, 2022, this model did not require any labeling. They were just given raw images of all X-rays, and you could identify from that pattern as to what was wrong and what was the symptom, what was the condition, because the model was trained on medical information already. So it's quite interesting. Again, we don't know the efficacy of this model in the real world. So this is a academic study. So it has to pass the peer review process, then go into the product somebody is using, and then the product has to be tested by somebody. The prototype has to be created, and then we can know that product is effective or not, or the model is effective or not. And by the time, some other model would have surpassed this existing model also. It's quite interesting that this is just one example I'm giving. And I told you about the narrow fields of oncology, orthopedics, and all these fields already are using different models. And we'll see a very vivid example of the clinical workflow of what happens in AI. And this is a very, very close to our home kind of a context where it's actually providing access to people who don't have access to ophthalmologic treatment or even detection of retinopathy that is there in the eye. I'll want 12 minutes of your time. I don't want to make this session too long, but I think these 12 minutes are worthwhile in understanding the difficulties and the clinical workflow required to implement any AI tool. So I think it will save me explaining all these things in detail, because the person explaining me, Dr. Kim Ramaswamy, does a fantastic job in providing the context for us. I just try and kill the lights for you guys so you can enjoy the video.
I'm sure most of us here could not tolerate those few moments of darkness. Imagine those millions of people living out in the dark world, despite the fact 80% of them can be helped, and it is unnecessary blindness. One man was unwilling to accept this form of human suffering, and he made it his mission to prevent this needless blindness. Dr. G. Venkataswamy, an ophthalmologist, after his retirement from government service, started the Arvind Eye Hospital in 1976. His aim or goal was to make sure that nobody becomes blind or remains blind just because they do not have access to care or because of economic reasons. How did he do it? He did not wait for those patients to walk into his hospital. Rather, he and his team went into the community seeking for those people who need eye care and showing them that with simple treatment, blindness can be prevented. One such blinding disease which can be prevented is called diabetic retinopathy. Now, diabetic retinopathy, as the name suggests, is a complication that occurs because of diabetes. Diabetes, as you all know, is pandemic today. And unfortunately, India is the diabetic capital of the world. But how many of you know that every fifth person above the age of 40 years in India is a diabetic? That's what the statistics say. Now, this is a huge, huge problem of not just diabetes, but the complications of diabetes such as diabetic retinopathy. So what do we do? But before I talk more about what we did, I just want to share about what is diabetic retinopathy for all of you. When we see, normally we see with the structure called retina, which is in the back of the eye. And this structure helps us to see anything, and it's like a film in the camera which captures, of course, the old age cameras, which captures the images and sends it to the brain for processing. Now, this retina has to be healthy. In diabetic patient, what happens is the blood vessels in the retina get affected and they slowly start oozing out particles, blood or cholesterol particles and various other stuff, thereby slowly damaging the entire retinal structure. Now, this problem, if left untreated, will slowly progress to a blinding condition, and at one point of time, it becomes totally irreversible. Now, you have to screen or look for this condition in early stages before the vision gets affected. And once the vision starts getting affected, it becomes very difficult to regain the original vision. So it's important that we screen all the diabetic patients for diabetic retinopathy. But unfortunately, in a country like India, we do not have enough retina specialists to screen all the diabetics. The problem of not diagnosing this early on can be a huge economic and social burden. So what do? My mentor, Dr. Nam, was the first to see this upcoming epidemic in India, and he really waged a war on diabetic retinopathy by creating awareness among the public, screening for diabetic retinopathy, and there are various other initiatives. In one, we wanted to screen the diabetic patients. Now, the diabetic patients normally, as I said, they are symptomless in the early stages and they do not access or go to the ophthalmologist for any eye examination. So how do we screen them? So what we thought of was using technology. We could go to the diabetologist's office or the primary care physician's office and screen them opportunistically, meaning these are the patients who are going to go to the diabetologist or the primary care physicians, and they get examined for the routine diabetic treatment. At this point of time, using this technology, we can screen them. So what we did, we placed a fundus camera, or what we call as a retinal camera, in the diabetology clinic, and these cameras take the picture of the back of the eye, which you saw earlier. And this can be easily operated by anybody with very little training in the diabetologist's office. Once these images are taken, they are uploaded through the internet to an eye hospital where a retina specialist would look at these images and grades them on the severity level. Based just on this, they would be able to say whether this patient has to see an ophthalmologist or not. Now, this report, just like a blood test report, is prepared, and then this is sent to the diabetologist's office in about 1 to 2 hours from the time the picture was taken. And this report will help the diabetologist to counsel the patient whether they should go see an ophthalmologist immediately or they just have to have an annual checkup. This way, diabetic patients actually get their screening done right at the doorstep, and this is why we call it as opportunistic. We also partnered with various organizations or government hospitals like primary care centers. We worked with medical labs or even pharmacies other than the primary care physicians, because these are the places where the patients, diabetic patients, would go to, and we screen them at these places in a very, very opportunistic way. Meanwhile, as we were doing this, I came across this image processing. And suddenly I was realizing, no, there is a way we could use technology to automate this entire process of screening. At the same time, I was being approached by various engineering institutions asking for retinal images. It was all happening at the same time. And I was totally excited about this because these people are planning to develop an AI tool for screening for diabetic retinopathy. So with all this excitement, I entered into this new venture and then shared the retinal images with all these people, thinking that we are going to have a complete screening tool, and this dream will become a reality for me. But I was disappointed by the fact that these attempts did not progress beyond publishing a paper after the algorithm recognized 1 or 2 abnormalities. Now here I was looking for a complete screening tool to automate the human grading process, because that's the bottleneck in the whole screening system. At the same time, in 2013, when someone from Google reached out to me for the same purpose, I immediately jumped at the opportunity because I realized, now here's a commercial company which will ensure a completion of this tool, and they would not leave halfway. And also what fueled my enthusiasm was that in this process, we will be able to screen a lot more patients in a very short time. And also we could deploy this in a lot of rural areas with just the help of technicians. So we started working with Google and started giving them labeled retinal images and worked with them. And when we fed these labeled images to their system, the system started learning the different abnormalities that you saw in the picture. And from these images, it started learning about how to diagnose diabetic retinopathy. The more and more images that we fed, the system was getting much better in diagnosing diabetic retinopathy. It was not just us, but Shankar Netralia from Chennai and Narayan Netralia from Bangalore also participated in these images when they gave these images. And once the basic AI tool was developed, we started testing it in our center. And we did multiple rounds of testing to validate the accuracy of this AI tool and also compared it with the human grading that we have been traditionally doing. With time, the system was doing extremely well. Meanwhile, Google also sent a set of retinal images to a pool of senior retina specialists to look at the images. And it was surprising to see there was a gross inconsistency in the grading among the retina specialists. Some of the basic mild diabetic retinopathy was diagnosed as a severe form or the other way. And this can happen in human grading for various reasons. I will not go into that. But what's important to see is the AI tool was consistently accurate over a period of time. Now, the availability of the combination of consistency and accuracy in association with it is available 24/7 makes it a great screening tool, especially in a resource-starved countries like in India. So we were able to get a CE certification for this. And once the CE certification has been obtained, we have now recently deployed it in many of our screening centers where we are doing the diabetic retinopathy screening. Earlier, our retina specialists were involved in grading those images. Today, they are free to do the clinical work while the Google's automated process is doing the excellent work of screening for diabetic retinopathy among these diabetics in the various centers. I hope with technology improving with time, more and more such devices are likely to come, and I'm sure it is going to come with the way AI is being used. We will probably see not only in the hospitals, but even in public places like railway stations or airports, where they may deploy such devices where people could go and self-screen their eyes just like a weighing machine using a coin. It's not about making doctors redundant. Immediately people ask, are doctors going to be jobless? It's not. With the AI, it is only going to enhance their capability and make them that much productive. I ideally would love to have all the patient data, look at the patient data and analyze all possible interventions. But the size of the data is so huge to assimilate all the data. Whereas if I had an AI-assisted tool which will analyze or crunch all numbers or analyze the entire possible scenarios in a very short period of time, it could give me or assist the doctor in making much better informed decision, which could be consistent and accurate most of the time. It's not just this, but there are many more use cases that are likely to come in future. And with that, I'm sure that the patient care or the management of patients are going to get only better for the better. I will end this talk by a quote from Dr. V, who said that intelligence and capability alone are not enough, but there should be a joy of doing something beautiful. Thank you.
I'm turning the lights on. Please brace your eyes. So it's fascinating. This talk was from 2015, and he was talking about AI tools being deployed in the field in countries like India, where people could have access to these tools and become better professionals and diagnose as many people as possible. This is the summary of what he said. Again, this is a presentation Dr. Kim gave in 2021 during COVID. So this is what I try to do. A nurse could actually scan the person, take a photo, and it can be sent to the AI tool. And a remote diagnostician can actually review the data and just go through the data again if the AI is actually capturing correctly or not, and then report back. This is the workflow that we saw, and this is how they are at a turnaround time of 1 hour now, deploying various tools. And you can see the technician over here going through the images manually as well to confirm. But it's not easy. So in the short video, he mentioned that it's a clinical workflow challenge. Challenges can be very random. So for example, the quality of photos. So if you have ambient light conditions which are not conducive for taking a good quality photo, you may not get the right input of image which the AI model can learn. The operator, although he said does not require to be fully trained, but there is certain skill required in order to take the image correctly or even input data correctly. Again, technicians, the turnover is quite high, so you may have to train people again and again, and the priorities of the workflow itself might change. You might want to improve patient outcomes, or you want to improve your productivity. These are two different goals sometimes. Also, some of the images can actually be ungradable. If there is a issue with the image, with the actual person's eye, say there's a presence of cataract or the pupil is small, again, I don't understand technical details of this, but if there are these ungradable images, then you have to find another way to intervene by a human medical professional to actually do a better analysis of what the sample was collected. So some of these things are not very, very obvious, although evolution has happened. And if you see models, so he mentioned Google as a primary example, but it's not just Google. So now in 2021, there are all these companies and all these models already testing in our market in India today, along with the tools that the ophthalmologist uses to detect all these things. So Google is just one of them who had an early start, who had the willingness to test their models and understand how this can be implemented, but they're not alone. In fact, if you go to the FDA, US FDA's website, this webpage updates, refreshes periodically. So as of last year, there were 500 models which were deployed already. And now when I checked, the latest update was October 19, there were 692 models already being deployed in the field. And this can be as simple as a fitness tracker you're wearing to as complex as the example we saw that Dr. Kim gave, that it is actually in the field of doing either ophthalmologic testing or cardiac screening or even orthopedic screening and so on. So it's very interesting. You just Google this and this page will open up and you can go through all the models, all the specifications of what they are doing, what are the patents linked to that, and which companies have promoted these models, which companies have founded these models that they are being used. So, of course, the top tech companies are also there, but there are also smaller companies we never heard of, which are using all the AI API tools available to create these models. But the interesting part is the outcome has to be same. So this is a chart from Yale Medical School's presentation, where the researcher is saying that although there are several competing models available, we are all judging them by the same benchmark, that what is the outcome. But each model would have come from a different direction. And let me explain this to you. So for example, this is something you would have read in the news that DeepMind, a subsidiary of Google, has this large language model trained on medical data, which is used for passing the medical licensing exam. So the accuracy as of December 22 was close to 67.2%. That is the percentage score that it will earn. The passing mark is 60% and it was easily passing the exam on its own. This year, it has gone to 85% score. This is a newer model that they have launched. What does it mean? It means that models constantly keep on improving based on the tools that they're using in the backend. All the buzzwords are here. You can have transformers, you can have neural networks, you can have all those things running in the background. But essentially what they're telling you is each model can be upgraded over a period of time, and the upgraded model can then be put into a clinical workflow somewhere in the machines that we see. So in medical research, again, I'm putting some jargon here. I'll explain to you if you require. Essentially, what people have been doing is there are these public databases of images available. So if you are doing the chest X-ray study, as we saw earlier, there will be a public labeled database of images to train your model. You can use that data, or you can also have unlabeled data from the web, scraping through different sources, or you could contact hospitals directly, like Dr. Kim was saying. The companies came to him for data of their patients to put it into the model and train the model from that data. Then something called as a CNN, which is a neural network kind of a model, which is used, and this code is available for free. Anybody can download it, and if you know how to implement the code and use the data that you have collected, you can actually train your own model based on that. Nowadays, with the transformer technology available, which Rajeev also discussed last time, you can have these pre-trained transformer models use or train on the data that you've gathered, and you can also train a model in a different way. So this is a different way of training, this is a different way of training. So not only there are different models, they're coming from different directions at the same problem. And you can also perform a supervised learning, where basically you have labeled data and you have human feedback as well put in the system, so that you can actually correct the model on the fly. And of course, you have published papers. That's where you go on reading all these papers in all these scientific journals, and you realize that each paper is talking more and more science fiction stuff nowadays. So when you see this feels like science fiction, but actually there's a huge application of this in drug discovery also. We'll talk about this right now. So the old way of doing drug discovery was very simple. Again, these are technical terms. I want to explain them to you. So basically, in vitro means in the laboratory. You mix chemicals and you know that the chemical compound is created, which is the outcome of the chemical process. Then it goes into in vivo. Now we know that this chemical process works, but will the chemical process work in a biological entity? So they will have these mice, which are the stalwarts of science experiments. They will inject mice, they will inject monkeys, they will inject other animals to see how mammals behave with the same chemical compound in their body. Then once it is safe enough on those animals, then it goes to human trials, where human beings will have a controlled group where they will not have the illness, and another group which will have the illness, and they will test it whether the chemical compound works or not. And then it goes for further approval for, say, FDA or any of the regulatory body who will approve the drug. Nowadays with AI models, there's another process added to the system called in silico. That means instead of putting in actual chemical compounds together, we can simulate the reaction on your computer. So imagine if you could do 10 experiments with the materials you have, imagine multiplying that by, say, 100 million. You can now parallelly run 100 million experiments and see which chemical compounds are thrown as output. And out of that, you pull the promising ones based on your past experience or your own judgment, your research judgment, and then it goes into the lab. Then it goes into the animal. Then it goes into humans. Then it goes for approval. This has essentially hijacked the entire process of trial and error that R&D used to have. So you could now identify disease targets much faster. So for example, if you know that you're trying to work on something in oncology, you will know exactly what kind of simulated outcomes you want. And based on that, you can create some of these target chemicals and see if they work on your actual results or not. Then you can also predict side effects of these drugs or even properties which otherwise you would not have seen. That's the beauty of some of these newer models. So for example, anybody who has played around with ChatGPT, sometimes it surprises you by giving you an answer which sounds much like a human responding to you rather than a machine responding to you. Similarly, there are these breakthroughs in some of these models as well, where the models throw some data or some output which otherwise you wouldn't have conceived in your own imagination. So there are some completely new molecules which have also been discovered because of using these models, which otherwise the scientists would have taken several decades also to come up with those molecules. And also, based on this, you can also prioritize much faster as to which are the promising candidates or not. So if you are a drug development company who is working on innovative drugs, you are partnering with so many research institutes in colleges, medical colleges, you actually can prioritize funding to those who are more promising rather than giving it equal to all the research projects available right now. The reason I brought up this topic is because, again, I'm talking about Google a lot because they are actually doing a lot of work in this. In 2019, the company DeepMind, which we heard earlier, they had a model called AlphaFold, which could predict protein structures. And only 3 lakh structures could be predicted that time. The latest model which has come actually can predict 200 million. So in drug discovery, the way a protein attaches, so again, I'm not a medical expert, I'm just simplifying it based on my understanding, but these protein structures are essential building blocks in our body which affect the outcome of chemical diagnosis that you have in the body, and you can actually cure your illness, or you can have some other effects in your body, generate some other chemicals in your body. So previously you are bound by how many structures you can predict or you can create. But now the prediction work is done by the model, and you just have to take one prediction and see in the real world if you can apply the model or not. And why it is important? So again, this is a very interesting prize called Lasker Research Award. Now this is a precursor to a Nobel Prize in Medicine. So most people who win the Lasker Award, they've also gone on to win the Nobel Prize in Medicine for some research breakthrough. And usually it is won by people who are medical professionals, medical researchers who have spent decades upon decades working on some problem, and they figure out something which is very interesting, and then it is a breakthrough in the medical industry. And this time it is won by these 2 guys who are from Google's DeepMind company. They have won the award this year for medical research. It's, I think, a very interesting appreciation for technology and its role to be played in the process of drug development, process of finding new solutions otherwise we couldn't have because computation was not available to us. Don't try and read this. I'm just giving you a workflow of how the same thing we talked about earlier about drug discovery happens, is that you have these targets available in your own database. Then you use AI to basically mine the data and find relevant targets. Then you also map the disease pathways and how the proteins and the drugs interact in the body of the human being, or whichever is the animal or human you're trying to cure. And these are knowledge graphs created based on that simulation, and they will go into the lead generation. So then you come into the area of protein model, which is where AlphaFold kind of models are actually used. So they can quickly go through a lot of protein structures and see which combinations work, which don't work, and throw you a lead, which is the next step. You can actually go faster to find what you're going to do. Then it can go quickly into the in vitro or preclinical development stage, which we saw earlier. So this is the workflow which can be multiplied 10x, 20x, 40x, 100x, whichever speed you want based on how you deploy these models. Again, none of it is theoretical. This is actually being used by most companies out there. So if you see the list of all these companies, again, these are all innovative drug discovery companies. So Lilly, Johnson & Johnson, Novo Nordisk, Merck, Roche, AbbVie, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Novartis, all companies we know who are innovators in their drug development categories are all working with these AI partnerships. But again, with a caveat. So most of them are So for example, if you go to the press releases of all these companies who are the AI companies, you will see interestingly they will be working on very smaller projects like $20 million funding, $10 million funding. Very few are north of $100 million funding. And what these programs are doing is they're trying to help these companies figure out the workflow that we saw earlier as fast as they can. So it's a race to finding the next molecule as fast as possible. So it becomes a very different competitive landscape today. So what moats we might perceive these companies used to have, we have to reevaluate all these moats, because whoever uses the AI models, and what if somebody hits the breakthrough sooner than somebody else, and whereas somebody was already on the path of winning that breakthrough very soon, and somebody deployed an AI model to surpass and speed up the process, can actually have a head start. So it's quite interesting to see how many companies are already using AI models, and these companies are already out there with their own models and even the softwares which are used in the research laboratory. So it's not just a model in an academic paper, but actually a deployed software. I don't want to go into too much depth about how different models work, but when it comes to, again, this is a slide from Google's DeepMind, and I want to give you the context of what has changed in the transformer era that we are living in today. So these three models were the older models which were used to train data, which required labeled information. And this is the one, the transformer-based model, is using a completely different way of looking at unlabeled information, which is not even data which is clean, just dumped from one database to the model, and the model can actually on its own find out what patterns exist in this. Now, this seems little outrageous, but people who have, that's why I said, if you have played with ChatGPT or with Bard, you will see the intelligence part sometimes, which is obvious, that you know the answer may be correct or incorrect. But sometimes if it gives you correct answers consistently, you feel that this is something different than just a search engine or just a ChatGPT. And with every new version, you will see the answers improving for the same question. So it's quite fascinating the way it works. And I'll give you a very intuitive example of this. So today I'm talking to you right now. I'm using these words and you're listening to these words and making sense of this. These are not from my memory. This is basically something that I have read, understood, and I'm generating this text to tell you what is happening right now. Imagine a model which is trained on all data, which is either in English language or medical data, and you ask a specific prompt and an answer is given to you. Now, if the model is not good, then the answer can be garbage. It can be just lies or garbled text. It will not know sequence of what it's trying to do. But as the model improves, it will start giving you better and better predictions. The model may not know that the prediction is right or wrong. It's the human's job to understand whether predictions are right or wrong. That's why we can judge the model's accuracy far better than the model itself can do it. So essentially, we are turning a very biological problem of detecting illnesses or discovering a drug into a computational problem. And as we live in this world today, we are awash in computing tools available, which was not there, say, 20, 30 years ago. So most of these projects have actually skyrocketed in terms of the acceptance that they have in the industry, because they can actually deliver results very quickly. Can actually go on a cloud server, fire up a server on the fly and say, okay, now this model is working. Do you want to test it right now? Whereas previously you would have to buy the server, get a research grant for getting it, and then execute it by the time the model would have been outdated. So it's quite an interesting computational problem of a biological problem. This small part of robotics, which we discussed in the industrial automation part as well, and it also applies to surgery, and can robots perform surgery? So today when we see surgery performed by machines, it's actually supervised or done by a surgeon somewhere remotely or whether in the next room. And the robot is essentially the tools that are going in and doing the work. But the human being is actually controlling the machine, which is the current state of surgeries today, which is no automation and only passive assistance. So there might be some things that the machine can do well, but the human will not want to do. But it's completely and fully supervised and run by a human surgeon. Whereas under research right now are partial automation and even conditional automation, where some things can be, so for example, you want to do sutures and the doctor doesn't want to do it. Now the sutures can be done by a robotic arm and it can do the stitches for that patient. And essentially what we are trying to imagine, like a factory making cars or vehicles or other electronic goods, which we see on YouTube when we Google for a industrial automation 4.0, you'll actually see all those automated factories. That doesn't apply in medicine, at least in surgery. So in surgery, we are still in the primitive era where a surgeon is still very much of value, where their input and their skills are very much of value. And machines have not reached that level yet where they can replace some tasks that the surgeon can do. So yeah, this is a futuristic sci-fi kind of thing. And that's the reason I want to mention this particular scene. It is too gory to show you right now on the screen. But if you are a fan of Ridley Scott and the Alien series, I would urge you to Google this, and the YouTube clip will play for this particular scene. It's a movie from 2012 called Prometheus. And in that scene, there is a medical pod in which a human actor goes in, and the pod detects what has to be done, and the person can select, okay, this is a abdominal surgery, and the machine does the entire surgery end to end. The context and the science fiction part is very interesting, and also the timeline which it shows, it's 2093 in the movie. So yeah, it's not too far away. So if it happens, the science fiction that has turned true so far, maybe in 2093 we will have a medpod where a human being just lies and the surgery is performed by a robot completely. One hopes. So interestingly, what happens is the clinical and the research part of AI are totally different. So we saw how Dr. Kim was saying that you're trying to create a clinical outcome of a technological process, which sometimes has all these hiccups and challenges in between. So you need a lot of unsupervised studies of the model, and also reinforce with human learning. So you constantly keep on editing and modifying that, which is the future of AI medicine right now. Every model that you see today is being updated and modified by human feedback. Also, an interesting part about AI is that how did the AI reach that conclusion? So one may not know with these transformer models how the prediction or how the result was generated. So for this, we really need to understand how the models work and how the models are deployed. So you cannot blindly take the model's outcome as a reality or truth. So AI has to work really hard on creating the explainable part, where can you easily convince somebody that this is the cause and effect of what the result was done. Because if you ask a human doctor, they will spend some time with you and explain this to you if they give a particular treatment procedure for you. Again, the interesting part is you can also educate people faster now. So if somebody starts today in the medical field in radiology without using the AI tools and with using AI tools, I think they will learn far faster in terms of the clinical workflows and improve on the clinical workflows also when they are ready to be in employment. And in fact, medical professional has a very rigorous career. So it's not very easy. You just cannot graduate and start working immediately. You have to be under apprenticeship for a decade or so, and then you become capable of calling yourself an expert or even have the clinical experience across the spectrum of cases that you have seen. And in India, it's actually very interesting because we have a paucity of doctors and medical professionals. So the volume of work that most Indian medical researchers see in person, it's actually quite astounding. Another interesting part is to improve the temporal understanding of patient data. What this means is, over a period of time, the same biomarkers, the same data, diagnostic data of the patient also has to be mapped, and the patient's condition has to be mapped over a period of time. So somebody who had come to you 5 years ago for a particular illness, can that be a record used for correlating what that person is going through today? Can you correlate that current state of that patient based on the old data that the patient has submitted to you? And for that, a very robust data system has to be created. So in developed countries, they have this electronic health record systems. There are 3-4 monopoly or duopoly companies in the US who are doing this in that model. But in many other cases, government-funded insurance programs actually have this patient data in one place. Nobody has run models on these yet, but let's see if a temporal understanding of patient history can be created, where you can diagnose the patient's current problem based on the past diagnostic information of the patient available to you. And lastly, the holy grail of medicine is, can it replace a physician? Because a physician has to have multiple skill sets. It's not a specialist. He has to look at the patient in the clinic and see what is wrong or what is going on, and what tests can be recommended. And from the tests, can you recommend to a specialist if required, or can you solve this person's, have a treatment solution for this person today? So right now, all the models we saw are very narrow models in their own field. So one is X-ray model, one is a chest X-ray, one is a ophthalmology tool. So these models don't talk to each other. So what if there is a heart patient who has diabetes and who is a patient right now for a cataract operation? Can you connect all these data together? Can the patient's own data? So what data do you have the patient itself? Is it just one file available to you, or are there multimodal data available? Right, from their fitness tracker, some data can be pulled out over a period of time, or from different diagnostic tests they have done so far, can you pull data from there, and then the model can predict what diagnosis can be given to the patient. So this is the holy grail right now. Many people are trying to work on this. And if you listen to this guy, Rajpurkar, sorry, that guy, I think is the best communicator right now for all the AI models that are out there. In fact, he tries to simplify a lot of these things. So if you just YouTube and this person's name, he is the researcher at Harvard Medical School. you'll actually find a lot of interesting videos of evolution of this person itself, along with the newer models that they are testing in the clinical context. I'm going a little bit faster because I want to give more time for Q&A, if at all, and also want to put out all these points out there so you can think more as to what can go wrong and what is happening right now. So there are some challenges in AI adoption which have already been documented in media, so it's nothing new right now. One thing we saw about automating the process too soon or removing the human too soon, which Dr. Kim also mentioned, that you cannot immediately eliminate the human being from that process. You have to make sure that the process itself is very robust. And those who do it are doomed to fail, because you can have clinical outcomes which can go very wrong, and legal liabilities can be quite severe in many countries. So many times people have these models which they test on a very narrow use case, but the way sometimes you implement them in a broader scale, for example, if the data is only based on white people in the US and you take that model and come to India, it may not work in the same way because we are different bodies, different DNAs to that extent. So improper implementation of models is also something that is a big challenge, and you have to train the data differently in different places. Again, many times when we see news items of all these AI models out there, these are prototype stage. These are not the actual final product. So if somebody is like looking at the futuristic design of a car at an auto show, and then when you see the actual car on the road 5 years later, it's actually a watered down version of the same product. In the same way, we don't know whether it's going to be a watered down version of the model or whether the prototype itself is going to be good enough to be called a product in the future. So very important to note that all the news items or hype that you see, you have to filter for prototype and product category. And many times, like I said, if you are creating a product for, say, Caucasians, it may not work for Asians, it may not work for Africans. So you have to make sure that the product market fit, ability to pay for that product, ability to use it at scale, who is funding that project, is it a government funded thing, is it an insurance company funded thing, or is it a medical group funded thing? You have to always be very careful about making money out of these things. I also spoke about multimodal data, which is data from different sources. One is through sensors, one is through diagnostic reports, and over a long period of time, information can be collected. This is not available yet. So in many cases, the models might say that they can accept multimodal data. And what does this mean? So in ChatGPT context, the ChatGPT used to only take text prompts in the beginning. Now you can also accept images, also accept videos, also accept audio files. So there is multimodal data going into the model, which is giving you output in a text format. So in this case, multimodal data is available for patient or not, and can you train on that over a long period of time? So this is a new frontier right now, which is extremely challenging because nobody wants to share data very easily. And data is, like I said, it's a sovereign for many individuals as well as the groups which are collecting the information. So data ownership issue has been rampant, and you can't just easily train a model anymore. Previously, like you used to just approach Shankara Eye Care, Arvind Eye Care and ask for data. But today it can be a legal issue if the laws don't allow you to pull data from somebody else very openly. We spoke about legal liability, but also the incentives need to be aligned. So is this an incentive for improving the patient care, or is the incentive improve productivity of the business that is being run to provide the patient care? It's a very important incentive system we have to understand, and whether companies who are training these models are willing to share their models with research groups very openly, because they're all competing with each other now. So it's not just the research group competing with the tech companies, but also tech companies among themselves are creating their own models and testing out. So whether they're available very easily or not is a question mark right now. And who decides are these models safe to be deployed in public? So that's why you go to the FDA website, who have cleared all these models. But out of these 700 odd models out there, maybe only a few tens models which are actually used right now. The 20 or 30 models are actually implemented right now in products which are being used in hospitals right now. So it's quite interesting to see that it's not exactly getting approval like a drug, and the drug gets to be sold and people can make money out of it. It's a very murky area of getting a model approved as a model which is functional and actually being used in the product to make money out of that. So we have seen with IBM Watson, the whole fanfare after the IBM Watson winning Jeopardy on the TV show. And Jeopardy is a word game which it won with huge amount of computing power. But eventually when it was advertised that it can also cure or also detect cancer and be a useful tool in oncology, it actually failed to deliver in the real world use cases. So a lot of these pilot studies that were there, they were prototypes which could not translate to a working product. And lastly, my favorite risk is the Theranos risk, where you may be just looking at vaporware. Somebody might be promoting something endlessly and it just might be nothing inside. It just might be a fraud. So it's very important to find and filter out all the news that you read about medical AI in medicine, to filter through these kind of problems that they can face going ahead if you want to make a judgment about whether they are a investment case or not. So again, we saw through some of the examples, right? What are the investment cases here? I could just jot down a few. Maybe you can look at the medical equipment manufacturers who are also doing the R&D. Maybe you can look at the AI model creators who are working with real world data and making their own models. We can also look at the infrastructure behind this entire AI boom, like the cloud companies who are providing the infrastructure. We can also see companies who are focusing on these incentives. One is improving patient care over the productivity of the hospital or the medical group that is working with these models. So there are a lot of these. So for example, in UK or even in the US, there are a lot of these medical groups which are actually testing out these models in order to do the former, which is not going to make them more money, but actually they are going to reduce their cost of providing care to their patients. Diagnostics was a very obvious thing. We saw that if you can get more throughput by deploying an AI tool, and more reports can be generated over a shorter period of time, you can also lower your costs, and that more volume can create some sort of operating leverage for you. But again, theoretical, debatable. That's why there's a question mark in the end of investment case. The whole idea should be to spend less on the R part and more on the D part in the R&D. So like we saw the drug development phase, if you're using AI tools to develop drugs quicker, then you're not wasting money on doing dart throwing. You're basically knowing exactly these are promising molecules. Within that, you can pick one promising molecule which is a higher ranked molecule. So you can spend less time or less money on doing the research part and spend more time in the development as to how can it reach the masses. Again, a lot of these tools are available as software as a service products. So these are very interesting products available for medical professionals. They can actually just log into the model, and the backend it's on a cloud. So you don't have to install something on your machine. It takes data from you and it gives you the answer immediately. So SaaS products, again, like a ChatGPT or a Bard kind of implementation, can really help in this case. And lastly, I think if it improves the health record systems that are there in some meaningful way, then we can actually have that dream of having the long-term data of a patient and what diagnosis they have given or what diagnostics tests they have taken in the past and how the patient's state has changed over a period of time. Can actually build a model of that patient's health over a long period of time. So this can actually help somebody get an instant history. So today, if you want to get a history of a patient, you have to actually go through the old files and see what has happened and then deduct as to what diagnosis can be done today. But if the AI model just summarizes to you, okay, based on the input given to you, this is summary of this person's health, and now you can diagnose based on what you see. Actually can improve the clinical productivity far more for patients. So there are tools available today. Be very mindful them with these challenges and see if they stand true to the test of being a good investment case or not. So lastly, I found this book immensely useful, Eric Topol's Deep Medicine. It's a book that released in 2021, but it talks about the history of all these AI models being developed and how automation tools have been used in medicine in different contexts. So all the things that we heard about today is a brief summary of what Eric Topol talks about in this book. He writes it in a more beautiful way. It's actually easy to understand as well. He writes very well. So I would urge you to read this book instead of watching this video. Maybe this video is short, but the book will give you much detailed context as to what all the things that we have heard today. Thank you so much. Any questions? Again, just to qualify, I'm not a medical professional. So if you have a medical question, don't ask me. If you have a technology related question, I can probably answer this question. Hope to answer it. Either it was a bouncer or everybody understood everything and there are no questions. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Whenever things got rough, I always remember what my father used to say.
Running a business does test a man, my son. There are ups and downs, glorious highs, and sometimes a low that leaves you feeling defeated.
The character of a man and the character of a business are not very different, are they?
Yes, but when the chips are down, we must stand up. dust ourselves off, and motor on.
Volatility. It's a funny thing. It makes you question yourself and wonder if you've made all the right decisions.
Sure, you can question some of your decisions, but stay steadfast on your goals.
Dad always said, there are no shortcuts and no quick profits.
There are no free lunches, are there? There is only one
Right way.
At PPFAS, we think like Rahul and his father. That volatility is a fact of running a business. And buying equity shares is like owning a part of that business. We use value investing principles to manage your money. This means we invest in the right businesses at reasonable prices and for a longer term.
PPFAS Mutual Fund. There's only one right way. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.